When my son Jake told me he didn't need me anymore, I smiled, walked to my driveway, and handed my car keys to my neighbor. By the end of the week, Jake was calling me desperately, begging me to come back. But I was just getting started. Justice has a way of teaching lessons that words never could. You won't believe what I did next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments if you've ever been taken for granted by your own family. It started on a Tuesday morning in October. I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee from the mug Jake had given me last Father's Day, the one that said, "World's Best Dad," in faded letters. The irony wasn't lost on me anymore. My phone buzzed with a text. "Dad, can you pick up Emma from soccer practice today? Sarah's working late again." This was my routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday, sometimes Saturdays too. I'd drop everything to help my son and his wife with their 8-year-old daughter. My granddaughter Emma meant the world to me, and they knew it. That was their ace card, and they played it perfectly. I grabbed my keys to the 2019 Honda Civic I'd bought specifically for these family duties. Reliable, safe, perfect for a grandfather who wanted to be dependable. As I drove to Emma's school, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. Jake had been distant lately, short in our conversations, always busy with something more important than his old man. The soccer field was buzzing with kids and parents. Emma ran to my car with her usual enthusiasm, her jersey grass-stained and her smile bright. "Grandpa, did you see my goal today?" She climbed into the back seat, chattering about her team and her friends. This was the highlight of my week, these moments with Emma when I felt truly needed, truly loved. But as I pulled into Jake's driveway, I noticed his expression through the window. He looked annoyed, checking his watch like I was late. I wasn't. I was exactly on time, like always. Emma hugged me goodbye and ran inside, leaving me standing awkwardly by my car as Jake approached. "Dad, we need to talk," he said, his voice carrying that tone I'd learned to dread. The tone that meant he wanted something, or worse, that he was about to deliver bad news wrapped in fake concern. "What's on your mind, son?" I asked, though every instinct told me I didn't want to hear the answer. Jake ran his hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "Look, Dad, Sarah and I have been talking. We think we need to be more independent as a family. We've been relying on you too much." The words hit me like a physical blow. After 3 years of being their go-to babysitter, their emergency contact, their free taxi service, they wanted independence. "What exactly does that mean, Jake?" "It means we don't need you to pick up Emma anymore. We don't need you to watch her on weekends. We've got it handled." He couldn't look me in the eyes as he spoke, his gaze fixed on his expensive SUV, the one I'd co-signed for when his credit wasn't good enough. I stood there in his driveway, the same driveway where I'd taught him to ride a bike, where we'd shot basketball hoops until dark, where I'd helped him load his belongings when he moved out for college. Now I was being dismissed like some hired help whose services were no longer required. "Is this about money?" I asked quietly. "Because if you need help with anything—" "No, Dad, it's not about money. It's about boundaries. Sarah thinks Emma has been getting too attached to you, and it's not healthy. Kids need to depend on their parents, not their grandparents. Too attached to me." The phrase twisted in my stomach like a knife. Emma, the little girl who called me every Sunday just to tell me about her week, who saved her best drawings to show me, who asked for my pancakes every time she stayed over. She was too attached to her grandfather. "And what does Emma think about this?" I asked, though I already knew they hadn't bothered to ask her. Jake shifted uncomfortably. "She's 8, Dad. She doesn't get a vote in parenting decisions." That's when it hit me. This wasn't about independence or healthy boundaries. This was about control. Jake and Sarah wanted to be the center of Emma's world, and my presence complicated that narrative. I was the grandfather who spoiled her, who listened to her stories, who made her feel special without expecting perfect behavior in return. "I see," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "So that's it? 3 years of dropping everything whenever you called, and now you don't need me anymore." "It's not personal, Dad." But it was personal. It was the most personal rejection I'd experienced since his mother died 5 years ago. I drove home in silence, my mind automatically cataloging everything I'd done for Jake and Sarah over the past 3 years. It wasn't just the babysitting and the car rides. It was so much more than that, and they knew it. The co-signing for their SUV, $45,000 loan that I guaranteed when Jake's credit score wasn't good enough. The down payment for their house, $15,000 from my retirement savings when they couldn't scrape together enough for the closing costs. The new roof last spring, $8,000 when a storm damaged their shingles, and their insurance had a high deductible. Then there were the smaller things that added up like drops filling a bucket. Every birthday party I'd paid for when they were tight on money. Every Christmas where I'd bought Emma's gifts because Jake and Sarah were trying to be more budget conscious. The weekly groceries I'd pick up and leave on their kitchen counter without being asked to pay me back. I'd kept track of none of it. Why would I? He was my son. Emma was my granddaughter, and family helps family. That's what I believed. That's what my father had taught me, and his father before him. You take care of your own. No questions asked, no debts calculated. But sitting in my living room that evening, surrounded by photos of Emma's school plays and soccer games, I started adding it up for the first time. Conservative estimate, $75,000 over 3 years. That didn't count the time. Hundreds of hours of babysitting, thousands of miles driven for their convenience, countless weekends spent at their beck and call, instead of living my own life. I'd been a widower for 5 years. After Margaret died, I could have traveled, taken up new hobbies, maybe even dated again. Instead, I'd thrown myself into being the best grandfather possible, the most helpful father-in-law, the most reliable man in their lives, and now they didn't need me anymore. My neighbor Tom was outside working in his garden when I stepped onto my porch. Tom was about my age, divorced, with kids who lived across the country and visited twice a year if he was lucky. We'd been neighbors for 8 years, but we'd never been close. Different circumstances, different lives. But tonight, watching him tend to his roses in the fading daylight, I realized something. Tom looked content, peaceful. He wasn't waiting for his phone to ring with emergency requests. He wasn't structuring his life around other people's needs. He was just living. For the first time in 3 years, I wondered what that might feel like. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Jake's words, looking for some hidden meaning, some sign that this wasn't really what he wanted. But the more I thought about it, the clearer the pattern became. It had started innocently enough. Jake and Sarah were newlyweds, struggling with daycare costs and demanding work schedules. Just until we get on our feet, Jake had said when he first asked me to watch Emma. I was thrilled. Being needed by my son, being trusted with my granddaughter. It felt like purpose after years of grief and loneliness. But somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being helpful and started being taken for granted. The requests became demands. The gratitude became expectation. The temporary arrangement became my entire identity. I remembered last month when I'd made plans to visit my brother in Phoenix, the first vacation I'd planned since Margaret died. Jake had called the night before my flight, panicked because their regular babysitter was sick, and they had some work event they couldn't miss. Could I cancel my trip? Just this once? I'd canceled my trip. Just this once, which had become just this always. I remembered the time I'd been in the emergency room with chest pains. Turned out to be heartburn, but the doctor wanted to keep me for observation. Jake had called while I was waiting for test results, asking if I could pick up Emma from school because he was running late from a client meeting. I'd left the hospital against medical advice to make sure Emma wasn't waiting alone. I remembered Sarah's birthday last year when they'd asked me to watch Emma, so they could have a romantic dinner. I'd been planning to visit Margaret's grave that day. It was the anniversary of our first date. But I'd said yes anyway, because family comes first. Family always comes first. Except now I wasn't family anymore. Now I was an obstacle to their independence. I got up and made coffee, even though it was 3 a.m. Outside, the street was quiet, except for the occasional car passing by. Normal people living normal lives, going about their business without orchestrating every moment around someone else's needs. Tom's house was dark, except for a single lamp in his front window. I wondered what he did with his evenings. Did he read? Watch movies? Call old friends? When was the last time I'd done any of those things without calculating whether I needed to keep my schedule open in case Jake called? That's when I realized the truth that had been staring me in the face for months. I hadn't just been helping my son. I'd been enabling him to take me for granted. And worse, I'd been so grateful for the crumbs of family connection that I'd convinced myself it was love. But love isn't one-sided. Love doesn't come with dismissal notices. And love sure as hell doesn't come with boundaries designed to push you out of the picture when you're no longer convenient. It was time to teach Jake what independence really looked like. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I made plans that had nothing to do with Jake's schedule. I called my brother in Phoenix and told him I'd like to visit next month. I looked up community college classes for senior citizens. I even browsed a dating website just to see what was out there. For the first time in years, I was thinking about my own life instead of arranging it around someone else's needs. That's when Jake called. "Hey, Dad, I know we talked yesterday, but Sarah's got that stomach bug going around. Could you pick up Emma today? Just this once. We'll figure out something permanent next week. Just this once." The phrase that had hijacked 3 years of my life. "No, Jake. You said you wanted independence. This is what independence looks like." There was a long pause. "Dad, I said we didn't need you for regular stuff. This is an emergency. Every call from you has been an emergency for 3 years. Figure it out." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from relief. For the first time since Margaret died, I'd put my own needs first. I'd said no to being someone's emergency backup plan. The phone rang again. "Jake." I let it go to voicemail. Then Sarah called. I let that go to voicemail too. Then Emma called from Jake's phone, her 8-year-old voice confused and hurt. "Grandpa? Daddy says you can't pick me up today. Are you mad at me?" That one broke my heart. I picked up. "No, sweetheart. I'm not mad at you. I love you more than anything. But Mommy and Daddy want to handle things by themselves now, remember? They're very capable people. But I want you to pick me up. You always pick me up." "I know, baby. But sometimes grown-ups make decisions that don't make sense to little girls. Your daddy will figure something out." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the phone. Emma would be fine. Jake would call a cab or leave work early or figure out some other solution. That's what capable, independent people do when they don't have a backup grandfather to solve their problems. An hour later, I heard car doors slamming in Tom's driveway. He was loading camping gear into his truck. Sleeping bags, a cooler, fishing rods. It looked like a weekend trip, maybe longer. I walked over. "Going somewhere nice?" Tom looked up, surprised. We'd never had a conversation longer than nice weather, in 8 years. "Up to Lake Coeur d'Alene. My nephew's got a cabin up there. Figured I'd spend a few days fishing. Maybe reading that book I've been meaning to get to. Sounds peaceful. Want to come?" The invitation surprised both of us. I mean, if you're not busy with family stuff. I looked back at my house, at the phone that would probably ring 6 more times before evening with various family emergencies. Then I looked at Tom's truck, loaded with the promise of a few days where my time belonged to me. You know what? I think I would. That weekend at Lake Coeur d'Alene was a revelation. I'd forgotten what silence sounded like without the underlying anxiety of waiting for my phone to ring. I'd forgotten how good coffee tasted when you could drink it slowly, without rushing to be somewhere else. I'd forgotten what it felt like to have a conversation that wasn't about logistics and schedules and other people's problems. Tom turned out to be excellent company. Divorced 15 years ago, kids grown and independent. Actually, independent, not Jake's version of independence, where you still expect your father to solve your emergencies. Tom had learned to fill his life with things that brought him joy instead of obligation. "You seem different up here," Tom said as we sat by the lake on Sunday morning, watching the sunrise paint the water gold. More relaxed. I thought about it. "I feel like myself again. Haven't felt that way in a long time. Family can do that to you," Tom said carefully. "Love them to death, but sometimes loving them means letting them handle their own lives." My phone had been buzzing periodically all weekend. Jake calling, Sarah calling, even Emma calling from various phones. I'd ignored them all. Whatever crises they were dealing with, they were handling it. They wanted independence, and I was giving it to them. On the drive home, I made a decision that would change everything. "Tom," I said, "what would you say if I told you I was thinking about giving you my car?" Tom laughed. "I'd say the mountain air affected your brain." "Why would you give me your car?" "Because I'm thinking about buying myself a motorcycle." It wasn't completely true. I hadn't thought about a motorcycle until that moment. But suddenly it sounded like the most reasonable thing in the world. A motorcycle meant freedom. It meant riding where I wanted, when I wanted, with room for exactly one person, me. "A motorcycle," Tom repeated. "At our age? I'm 61, not 91. And I'm tired of driving around in a practical family car, arranging my life around other people's convenience. Tom was quiet for a long moment. You're serious about this? Dead serious. When we pulled into our neighborhood that Sunday evening, I saw Jake's SUV in my driveway. He was pacing by my front door, clearly agitated. Sarah was sitting in the passenger seat with her arms crossed, and Emma was in the back, probably wondering why they were at Grandpa's house instead of home having dinner. Tom pulled into his own driveway and cut the engine. Looks like the independence experiment didn't go so well. I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months. Looks like it went exactly as well as I expected. Jake spotted me getting out of Tom's truck and stormed over. Where the hell have you been? Do you know what kind of week we've had? The independent kind, I suggested. His face went red. This isn't funny, Dad. Sarah missed 2 days of work because we couldn't find reliable childcare. I had to cancel a client meeting. Emma cried herself to sleep Friday night because you wouldn't answer your phone. I looked past Jake to Emma's face in the back seat window. She did look sad, and that tugged at my heart. But she also looked fine. Fed, healthy, cared for by her parents like millions of other children whose grandparents weren't on call 24/7. Sounds like you figured it out, I said. We shouldn't have to figure it out. That's what family does. They help each other. You're absolutely right, I said. Family does help each other. Both ways. The next morning, Jake was back. This time he brought back up Sarah. They sat in my living room like they were staging an intervention, their faces serious and concerned. Emma was at school, which meant this conversation was about to get brutal. Dad, Sarah began in that careful tone she used when she wanted something big. We need to talk about what happened this weekend. What about it? You disappeared. You didn't answer your phone. We were worried sick. I almost laughed at that. Worried? Or inconvenienced? Jake leaned forward. Dad, I know you're upset about what I said last week, but abandoning us in a crisis isn't the answer. Abandoning you? Jake, you told me you didn't need me anymore. I was giving you exactly what you asked for. Sarah jumped in. What Jake meant was that we wanted to be more self-reliant for regular things. But emergencies are different. When I was throwing up every hour and couldn't drive, that wasn't the time to make a point. The audacity was breathtaking. They wanted independence on their terms. Independence that still included me as their emergency backup, their crisis manager, their free labor when their carefully organized lives fell apart. Sarah, I said quietly, what do other parents do when they get the stomach flu? What? Other parents. The ones who don't have a grandfather on call. What do they do when one parent is sick and the other has to work? She looked confused, like the question had never occurred to her. I don't know. They figure it out. Right. They figure it out. They call in sick to work. They ask neighbors for help. They hire babysitters. They handle their own emergencies like grown adults. Jake's jaw tightened. So you're saying we can't count on you anymore? Ever? I'm saying you can't take me for granted anymore. There's a difference. This is ridiculous, Sarah said, her voice rising. You're our family, Emma's grandfather. You can't just check out whenever you feel like it. Why not? You checked me out whenever you felt like it. The room went silent. Finally, Sarah asked, What do you mean? I stood up and walked to my mantel where I kept photos of Emma. School pictures, soccer team photos, birthday parties. In every single one, she was smiling, happy, loved. 3 years ago, you asked for help with Emma. I said yes because I love you both, and I love her. But somewhere along the way, helping became expected. Expected became demanded. And demanded became my entire identity. I turned back to face them. When was the last time either of you asked how I was doing? When was the last time you invited me over for dinner just because you enjoyed my company? When was the last time we had a conversation that wasn't about what you needed me to do? Neither of them answered. I'll tell you when. Never. Not once in 3 years have I been anything more to you than a solution to your problems. Jake stood up, his face flushed. That's not true. Isn't it? Then tell me something about my life that doesn't involve Emma or your emergencies. Tell me what I've been doing with my free time, what books I've been reading, what I think about current events. Silence. You can't, because you've never asked. I've been so available, so eager to help, that you forgot I was a person with my own life. Sarah's voice was smaller now. We didn't forget. We needed you. And I was there. For 3 years, I was there every single time. But last week, you decided you didn't need me anymore. So I'm giving you what you wanted. What we wanted was balance. Jake said desperately. Not complete abandonment? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Jake, you told me Emma was getting too attached to me. You said it wasn't healthy. So I'm helping you create healthy boundaries. By disappearing for a weekend without telling us where you were going. By living my life instead of arranging it around your convenience. That's when I made the announcement that would change everything. Speaking of which, I'm selling my car. The Honda Civic wasn't just transportation. It was the symbol of my availability, my willingness to drop everything for family. 4 doors, excellent safety ratings, reliable in all weather. I'd chosen that car specifically because it was perfect for a grandfather's duties. Jake and Sarah stared at me like I'd announced I was joining the circus. You're selling your car? Sarah asked. Why would you sell your car? Because I don't need a family-friendly vehicle anymore. I'm buying a motorcycle. A motorcycle. Jake said it like I'd said I was buying a rocket ship. Dad, you're 61 years old. Exactly. I'm 61, not dead. And I've spent the last 3 years driving a practical sedan to accommodate everyone else's needs. Time to drive something that accommodates mine. The truth was, I'd already called 3 motorcycle dealerships that morning. I had an appointment at Kawasaki at 2 p.m. to test drive a Vulcan 900, big enough to handle highway speeds, comfortable enough for a weekend trip, impractical enough to make it clear that my days as the family taxi were over. But how will you pick up Emma? Sarah asked, missing the point entirely. I won't be picking up Emma, remember? You don't need me for that anymore. Dad, Jake said carefully, if this is about money, we can start paying you for gas or something. Money. They thought this was about money. 3 years of free labor, $75,000 in direct financial support, countless hours of my life arranged around their convenience, and they thought a gas allowance would fix it. It's not about money, Jake. It's about respect. We respect you. No, you don't. You appreciate me. You depend on me. You expect things from me, but you don't respect me. I walked to my kitchen and pulled out the classified ad section of the newspaper. I'd already circled 3 potential buyers for the Honda. All of them were young families, people who needed reliable transportation for children and errands and the mundane responsibilities of family life. I've got 3 people coming to look at the car this week, I announced. First reasonable offer, it's gone. Sarah stood up abruptly. This is insane. You're having some kind of crisis. Maybe you should talk to someone. I am talking to someone. I'm talking to my son and daughter-in-law, trying to explain that when you tell someone you don't need them anymore, they might take you at your word. We didn't mean forever, Jake said desperately. What did you mean then? That you didn't need me on Tuesdays and Thursdays? That you didn't need me for regular stuff, but you still needed me for irregular stuff? That you wanted to keep me on standby for whenever your perfectly independent life hit a bump? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Tom chose that moment to knock on my door. Perfect timing. Robert, he said when I answered, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about the car. Jake and Sarah were listening from the living room. What about it? Well, if you're serious about selling it, I could use a reliable second car. My truck's great for camping, but it's hell on gas for everyday driving. I smiled. Want to take a look? We walked outside, leaving Jake and Sarah sitting in my living room like stunned fish. Tom circled the Honda, checking the tires, peering under the hood, asking practical questions about maintenance and mileage. It's a good car, I told him honestly. I've taken excellent care of it. I can tell. What are you asking for it? I named a price that was fair but firm. Tom nodded. Deal. We shook hands right there in my driveway, while my son and daughter-in-law watched through the window. Tom said he'd bring the cash tomorrow, and I said I'd have the title ready. When I walked back inside, Jake and Sarah were exactly where I'd left them, except now they looked like they'd seen a ghost. You just sold our car, Sarah whispered. I just sold my car, I corrected, to my neighbor, who, by the way, asked me how I was doing before he asked me for anything. That evening, Jake called me 6 times. I didn't answer any of them. The next morning, he showed up at my door at 7 a.m. with coffee and donuts, my favorite kind from the bakery downtown. Dad, he said when I opened the door, we need to fix this. There's nothing to fix. You wanted independence, I'm giving you independence. That's not what we wanted, and you know it. I let him in, mostly because the neighbors were starting to notice the scene on my front porch. Jake set the coffee and donuts on my kitchen table like peace offerings. Dad, I talked to Sarah all night. We realized we made a mistake. What mistake was that? We took you for granted. We got comfortable having you available all the time and we forgot to appreciate it. Progress. Small progress, but progress. Go on. We want to work something out. A schedule, maybe. Set times when we know we can count on you, and other times when you're free to do your own thing. I poured myself coffee from the cup he'd brought. It was good coffee. Expensive coffee. The kind of coffee you bring when you're trying to apologize for something big. Jake, what do you think I did with my time before Emma was born? He looked confused. I don't know. You worked. You took care of Mom when she was sick. I had friends. I had hobbies. I traveled. Your mother and I went dancing every Friday night for 30 years. We took weekend trips. We had dinner parties. We volunteered at the church. I had a life. You still have a life. Do I? When was the last time I went anywhere that wasn't related to your family's needs? When was the last time I made plans that didn't include the possibility of canceling them if you called? Jake was quiet. 3 years ago, I stopped living my life and started living yours. And you know what? That was my choice, my mistake. But last week, when you told me I wasn't needed anymore, you gave me permission to remember who I was before I became your emergency backup. We never said you weren't needed. Jake, you said Emma was getting too attached to me. You said it wasn't healthy. What exactly did you think would happen when you decided I was bad for your daughter? His face crumpled. I didn't think it through. Sarah's been reading these parenting books about independence and boundaries, and her therapist said that kids who are too close to their grandparents sometimes have trouble respecting their parents' authority. So you decided the problem was me. We decided we needed to be more in control of Emma's daily routine. I set down my coffee cup. Jake, in 3 years, have I ever contradicted your parenting? Have I ever undermined your authority? Have I ever told Emma she could do something you said she couldn't? No. Have I ever been anything but supportive of you and Sarah as parents? No. Then what exactly was the problem with Emma being close to me? Long pause. Sarah felt like Emma was more excited to see you than us sometimes. And there it was. The truth. This wasn't about healthy boundaries or independence. This was about jealousy. Sarah was jealous that Emma lit up when she saw her grandfather. Instead of being happy that their daughter had another adult who loved her unconditionally, they saw it as competition. So, you decided to eliminate the competition. Dad, it wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. And now you're here with expensive coffee and donuts because your independence experiment failed, and you realized you actually do need me, but only when it's convenient for you. Jake's voice was desperate now. What do you want from us? I want you to figure out your own life without using me as a safety net. I want you to appreciate the people who love you instead of taking them for granted. And I want you to understand that relationships go both ways. We can do that. Can you? Because yesterday Sarah asked me how other parents handle emergencies, and she genuinely didn't know. You've been so dependent on me that you never learned to be truly independent. I stood up and walked to the window where I could see Tom loading camping gear into his truck again. Another weekend trip. Another adventure planned around his own interests instead of someone else's schedule. Jake, I'm going to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. Okay. If you could go back 3 years and choose between having a father who was available for every emergency and having a father who was living a full, interesting life that occasionally intersected with yours, which would you choose? He was quiet for a long time. Finally, the second one. Then that's what you're going to get. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I went motorcycle shopping by myself, for myself, without consulting anyone about timing or budget or practicality. The Kawasaki Vulcan 900 was everything I'd hoped. Black and chrome, comfortable but powerful, loud enough to announce that its rider wasn't trying to blend into the background anymore. The salesman, a guy about Jake's age named Mike, treated me with the kind of respect I'd forgotten existed. First bike? He asked. First bike in 40 years. Used to ride when I was young before family responsibilities took over. Mike nodded, understanding. Getting back to it, huh? Good for you. Life's too short to drive practical cars forever. I rode 3 different models, feeling the wind and the power and the pure joy of moving through the world on my own terms. By evening, I'd put a deposit down on the Vulcan and scheduled delivery for Friday. When I got home, there were 4 voicemails on my machine. Jake, Sarah, Jake again, and Emma calling from Sarah's phone. I listened to Emma's message first. Grandpa, Daddy says you're buying a motorcycle. That sounds really cool. Can I see it when you get it? I love you. That message made me smile. Emma wasn't worried about how my motorcycle would affect her life. She was just excited that her grandfather was doing something that made him happy. Jake's messages were different. Panic, frustration, and finally resignation. In the last one, he said, "Dad, I get it. You're mad, and you have every right to be. Call me when you're ready to talk about how we move forward." How we move forward. Like this was a negotiation between equals, instead of a son realizing his father had boundaries. That evening, Tom came over with the cash for the Honda. We completed the transaction in my driveway, and he drove his new car home with obvious satisfaction. As he was pulling into his garage, another neighbor, Mrs. Henderson from 3 houses down, approached me. "Robert, is everything all right? I saw your son over here a lot lately, and now you're selling your car." Mrs. Henderson was about my age, widowed for 2 years, with grown children who lived in other states. We'd exchanged pleasantries over the years but never had real conversations. "Everything's fine, Margaret. Just making some changes." "Good for you," she said with surprising enthusiasm. "After my Harold died, my kids wanted me to move closer to them, give up my independence, let them manage my life. I told them absolutely not. I raised them to be independent adults, not dependent children." "That's exactly right. You know, a few of us are getting together for dinner tomorrow night at that new Italian place downtown. Nothing fancy, just friends enjoying good food and conversation. You should join us." An invitation. An actual social invitation that had nothing to do with family obligations or emergency childcare. When was the last time someone had invited me to do something just because they enjoyed my company? "I'd like that," I said. 7 o'clock. "And Robert, good for you with the motorcycle. Harold always wanted one, but I was too worried about safety. I regret not encouraging him now." After she left, I sat on my front porch and called my brother in Phoenix. "Hey Paul, it's Robert. Remember that invitation to visit? I'm thinking about taking you up on it." "Really? What about Jake and the baby?" "Emma's not a baby anymore, and Jake's learning to handle his own family without backup." "Good for you. When were you thinking?" "How about next month? I'll ride down on my new motorcycle." Paul laughed. "A motorcycle? At your age?" "I'm having a midlife crisis at 61. Better late than never." We talked for an hour about routes and timing and places to stop along the way. For the first time in years, I was making plans that excited me, plans that had nothing to do with anyone else's needs or schedules or convenience. The phone rang as soon as I hung up with Paul. Jake again. This time I answered. "Dad, thank God. I was starting to think you'd never speak to me again. I'm speaking to you now. Can I come over? I think we need to have a real conversation about this." "You can come over, but Emma stays home with Sarah tonight. This conversation is between us." "Okay, I'll be right there." Jake arrived 20 minutes later, and for the first time in years, he looked like he'd really thought about what he wanted to say instead of just expecting me to accommodate whatever emotion he was feeling. "Dad, I need to apologize. Not just for last week, but for the past 3 years. I'm listening. I took advantage of your love for Emma and your willingness to help. I let Sarah and I get comfortable treating you like our personal assistant instead of my father. And when we decided we wanted more independence, we handled it in the worst possible way. It was a good start. Go on. I've been thinking about what you said, about relationships going both ways. You're right. I can't remember the last time I asked about your life or your interests or your feelings about anything that didn't involve our family. Neither can I." Jake took a deep breath. "So I'm asking now. How are you doing, Dad? Really doing. Not as Emma's grandfather or our emergency backup, but as a person." The question caught me off guard. It was such a simple question, but nobody had asked it in so long that I'd almost forgotten how to answer. "Honestly, I'm doing better than I have in years. For the first time since your mother died, I'm excited about the future. I'm making plans that are about what I want to do, instead of what other people need me to do. Like the motorcycle. Like the motorcycle. And dinner with neighbors tomorrow night. And a road trip to visit Paul next month. And maybe taking a photography class at the community college." Jake nodded slowly. "Those all sound like good things. Things you should have been doing all along. Things I would have been doing if I hadn't been so busy being indispensable to your family. We never asked you to give up your life. You didn't ask me not to either. And I was so grateful to feel needed again after your mom died, that I forgot I had my own needs. We sat quietly for a moment, both of us processing 3 years of misunderstandings and missed opportunities. Dad, is there any way we can start over? Build a relationship that works for both of us? What would that look like? I don't know. That's why I'm asking. I appreciated his honesty. Jake, I love Emma more than life itself, and I love you and Sarah. But I won't be your emergency backup anymore. I won't arrange my life around your convenience, and I won't accept being treated like hired help, who should be grateful for the privilege of serving your family. That's fair. If you want me in your lives, it has to be because you enjoy my company, not because you need my services. It has to be because you value my presence, not my availability. What does that mean practically? It means you call me because you want to talk, not because you need something. It means you invite me to dinner because you want my company, not because you need a babysitter. It means Emma and I have a relationship that's about love, not convenience. Jake was taking mental notes. And if we have a real emergency? Define real emergency. Someone's in the hospital, car accident, house fire. Those are real emergencies. Sarah having the stomach flu is not. You being late for work is not. Your babysitter canceling is not. Okay, that's fair. And Jake, the next time someone suggests that Emma is too attached to me, you remember who paid for your house down payment, and your car loan, and your roof repair. You remember who's been there for every crisis for 3 years without complaint. And you defend me. I will. I should have done that last week. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised and loved and supported, who was finally trying to see me as a person instead of a resource. There's one more thing. What? I want to be invited to family things because I'm family, not because you need me to help host or clean up or watch Emma. I want to be a guest at your dinner parties, not the unpaid help. Done. And sometimes, you come to my place. You see how I'm living, what I'm interested in, who I'm becoming now that I'm not organizing my life around yours. Jake smiled for the first time all week. I'd like that, Dad. I really would. Maybe we could figure this out after all. The next few weeks became a test of whether Jake's promises were just words or actual change. The first test came 3 days later when Sarah called with what she probably considered an emergency. Emma had forgotten her lunch money, and could I drop some off at school since I was retired and available? Sarah, I said calmly, what do other parents do when their kids forget lunch money? They bring it to school? And if they can't leave work, I guess the kid buys lunch at school? Right. Emma can buy lunch at school today. She'll survive. But she really wanted the sandwich I made her. Then she'll remember her lunch money tomorrow. Sarah hung up frustrated, but she handled it. Emma ate school lunch, and the world didn't end. Test number 2 came the following week, when Jake called to say their regular babysitter was sick, and they had tickets to a concert they'd been planning to attend for months. Could I possibly watch Emma? Just this once? Jake, hire a different babysitter. We don't know any other babysitters. Then learn. Ask other parents for recommendations. Check online. Figure it out like other adults do. But we trust you with Emma more than some stranger. I appreciate that. But solving your child care emergencies isn't my job anymore. They ended up hiring a babysitter service. Emma was fine. The babysitter was competent and kind. And Jake learned that there were other options besides Grandpa when life didn't go according to plan. The real test came the following Saturday, when Emma called me directly. Grandpa, can you come over? Mommy and Daddy are fighting about money and it's really loud. That was a real emergency. Not a child care emergency, but an emotional one. A little girl was scared and wanted comfort from someone she trusted. I'll be right there, sweetheart. I drove over in Tom's truck. He'd let me borrow it while I waited for the motorcycle to be delivered. When I arrived, I could hear the argument through the front door. Jake and Sarah were in their kitchen, voices raised, discussing credit card bills and budgets and who was responsible for what. Emma answered the door in her pajamas, looking small and worried. Are they getting divorced? She asked. No, baby. Sometimes grown-ups argue about boring things like money. It's not fun to listen to, but it doesn't mean they don't love each other or love you. I stayed for 2 hours, playing board games with Emma, while Jake and Sarah worked through whatever financial stress they were dealing with. When they finally emerged from the kitchen, they looked embarrassed. Dad, thank you for coming, Jake said quietly. We didn't mean for Emma to hear all that. Arguments happen, but maybe next time you take it outside or wait until she's asleep. You're right. I hugged Emma goodbye and headed home, feeling good about the interaction. This was what family support should look like, being there for the things that really mattered, not the everyday inconveniences that adults should handle themselves. That evening, Jake called. "Dad, I wanted to thank you again for today, and to tell you something." "What's that?" "The argument Sarah and I were having. It was partly about money we owe you. The car loan you co-signed, the house down payment, all the times you've covered expenses for us over the years. We were trying to figure out a way to start paying you back. I hadn't been expecting that." "You don't owe me money, Jake. That was family help." "But it wasn't fair. We took and took without ever thinking about the financial burden we were putting on you. I gave because I wanted to help, and we took because we got used to having you solve our problems. But Sarah and I talked, and we want to start acting like adults. We want to pay our own bills and handle our own emergencies and contribute to family instead of just taking from it." "What does that mean?" "It means we're refinancing the house to pay you back the down payment money. It means we're taking over the car payments you co-signed. And it means we want to take you to dinner next weekend, not because we need something, but because we want to spend time with you." For the first time in this whole mess, I felt like Jake really understood what had gone wrong and what needed to change. "I'd like that," I said, and I meant it. Friday arrived with the rumble of a delivery truck in my driveway. The Kawasaki Vulcan 900 was everything I'd remembered and more. Sitting on that bike for the first time in 3 years, feeling the power between my legs and the wind in my face, I felt like I was reclaiming a part of myself I'd buried under family obligations. Tom came out to admire the bike as I took my first ride around the neighborhood. When I pulled back into my driveway, he was grinning like a proud parent. "How does it feel?" "Like freedom." That evening, Jake brought Emma over to see the motorcycle. I'd been wondering how this would go, whether they'd treat it as another eccentricity to tolerate, or whether they'd understand what it represented. Emma was fascinated, asking questions about how fast it could go and whether I'd take her for rides when she was older. Jake circled it slowly, examining the chrome and the engine like he was trying to understand something fundamental about his father. "It's beautiful, Dad." "Thank you. Very independent." I laughed. "That's the idea. When are you planning to take it on a real trip?" "Next month. I'm riding to Phoenix to visit Paul. Should take me 3 days, maybe 4 if I take scenic routes." Jake nodded slowly. "Mom would have loved this. She always said you looked happiest on that old Honda you had when you were young." He was right. Margaret had encouraged my motorcycle hobby back in the day, even though her friends thought she was crazy to let her husband ride those dangerous things. When we started a family, I'd sold the bike without her asking, assuming that was what responsible fathers did. She would have understood this, I agreed. The bike or the whole independence thing? Both. Your mother never tried to change me into someone I wasn't. She loved who I was, not who she needed me to be. Emma was running her hands along the leather seat, careful not to touch anything I'd told her not to. "Grandpa, can I sit on it?" "Sure, sweetheart, but only when I'm here to help you." I lifted Emma onto the bike, steadying her as she grabbed the handlebars and made motorcycle noises. For a moment, I could see her at 16, asking to borrow my bike for a date. The thought made me smile instead of panic. "Dad," Jake said quietly, "I need to apologize for something else." "What's that?" "For the past 3 years, I've been so focused on what kind of grandfather I wanted you to be that I forgot to appreciate what kind of man you are. You raised me to be independent and strong and capable, and then I spent years treating you like those qualities didn't matter. You were adjusting to being a parent. It's hard. It's no excuse. I lost sight of the fact that you're not just Emma's grandfather. You're Robert Martinez, the man who built a business from scratch, who took care of Mom through cancer, who taught me how to change oil and tie knots and stand up for myself." I looked at my son, this man who was finally seeing me as a complete person instead of just a role in his family drama. "Jake, do you know why I really bought this motorcycle? Because you wanted to feel young again. Because I wanted to remember that I'm still alive, not just surviving, not just serving other people's needs, but actually living. Your mother and I used to talk about all the places we'd go when we retired, all the adventures we'd have. When she died, I thought those dreams died with her, but they didn't. They were just waiting for me to remember them." Emma was still on the bike, pretending to ride through imaginary landscapes. Watching her, I realized something important. You know what else? What? I want Emma to grow up knowing that aging doesn't mean giving up on dreams. I want her to see her grandfather as someone who takes risks and has adventures and lives fully. Not just someone who's always available when her parents need backup. Jake smiled. She's going to brag to all her friends that her grandpa has a motorcycle. Good. Let her be proud of me for being interesting, not just for being useful. That night, after Jake and Emma went home, I sat in my garage with the motorcycle, planning my route to Phoenix. I spread maps across my workbench, marking scenic byways and interesting stops. Flagstaff, Sedona, the Grand Canyon if I felt like a detour. For the first time in years, I was planning something just for the joy of it.